I can't speak really loud, so if you can't hear me, you'll just have to wave frantically or do something else to pass the time. But I'll do my best. So I'll just start by saying my son isn't actually child genius. He's 8 years old, not 8 months old. Because if he watches this, he'll kill me anyway. But I wanted to just tell you a little bit about the work that we do. I'm sure some of you know us. Well, I certainly know some of you anyway. But we've been working in London since 1997. I actually got recruited to do this work by a man who is running a crisis pregnancy centre in Dublin. And they'd got their idea from a crisis pregnancy centre in the States that they'd visited. And it's something that we've learnt an awful lot from doing over the last few years. But at the time when I started, I knew that there were crisis pregnancy centres in the UK. I didn't know an awful lot about them. I did learn more about them as I went along. But the particular foundation of this work was an outreach to women who are set on abortion. Now, in some regards, every crisis pregnancy centre is trying to do that. But I think, obviously, there's a need to have help there for women who want to keep their babies and are looking for help. So many crisis pregnancy centres end up dealing largely with those kind of women, partly because it's extremely hard to reach the women who are very set on abortion, and secondly because women who are very set on abortion may not really initially want the help of crisis pregnancy centres. But our centre was set up with the direct aim of reaching out to women who are solely decided on abortion. We do end up helping some of the other ladies as well who just want a bit of help to continue. But our primary mission is to reach the women who are dead set on abortion. I think that the work of crisis pregnancy centres is often overlooked. I mean, how many people here have been involved in a pro-life vigil or in a 40 Days for Life campaign? I'm sure all the rest of you are going to be, right? But I think it has to be looked at that we can turn women around at the gates of the abortion clinic. But once they've changed their mind, if we have nothing to offer them, many women will drift back to the abortion centre. I mean, there are things that we do to try and prevent that, prayer, our friendship to the women, but often if we haven't got real solutions to the practical problems they're facing, then there's a lot of pressure on the woman. Even in our own centre, we find when the woman comes in, she's under so much pressure that, you know, unless we're meeting with her regularly, she will often find herself coming back towards the abortion clinic. And you'll find that women sometimes will come in and they'll sit down for counselling and they'll stay with us as long as possible. You'll think eventually, you know, is this woman ever going to go home? You don't want to rush her, but she's been here for like 8 hours now. But they'll often say to you, you know, I know when I go back out that door, I'm going to come back under that same pressure I was under before. So just to go back to the foundations of our work, when we first got started, we're a Catholic centre, and I really believe that God calls people where they are, you know. One thing that I find really difficult is that in the pro-life movement, you often find there's big pressure to be a secular group or to not bring your religion in through the door. I mean, God is quite capable of calling people from whatever their religious tradition is, and actually even God is capable of calling atheists to do pro-life work. And so I don't think it's necessary for Catholics or evangelicals or anybody who comes into the pro-life movement to leave their religion at the door and pretend they're something else. We don't have to be neutral to attract people who are neutral themselves about their belief or, you know, don't have a strong religious belief. God calls Catholics to witness in their Catholic faith in the pro-life movement. He calls Protestants to witness in their Protestant faith in the pro-life movement. And I think one of the greatest evils, particularly in this country over the last 40 years, is a number of times as a Catholic, you know, you get on the bus to some pro-life event and your Catholic friends are saying, well, we mustn't say the rosary because we'll offend those people. I mean, you can see Northern Ireland is a great example where on certain days of the week you'll have Protestants standing on this side of the abortion centre, Catholics standing on this side, saying their own prayers, but both in unity actually, even though they're not saying the rosary together or whatever. They're both praying, they're both asking the same Lord for the end of abortion. And there's no reason why we should leave our faith at the door. So, you know, anyone who's not Catholic here today, I hope nothing I say about our prayer or traditions offends you. And certainly anything that you do as part of your religious tradition doesn't offend me if you're doing it in the cause of life. So for us, the spiritual foundation is very important. And we try to offer our work through Our Lady to Christ. I mean, for us as Catholics, we see that approach is the approach that Jesus himself used in coming to the world. He came through Our Lady, not because that was the only way he could have come or because of Our Lady's own power as a woman, but because he chose her to be the vessel for his coming. He saw it as the most efficacious way. Jesus didn't have to come into the world through a woman, but that was the choice that he made for the most efficacious way, the shortest journey between God and man. And we use the same approach in offering our work to Jesus through Mary. So, just Frank Duff, who founded the Legion of Mary, said on this issue, "Without the Marian element, it is possible to act prayerfully and energetically, and yet to accomplish nothing of worth. For Our Lady is part of the principle of fruitfulness. Our Lord does not please to be fruitful by himself. He did not come to this earth without Mary. Likewise, he insists on her action as the condition of his revolutionary entry into souls. Without Mary, accordingly, the greatest strivings will only end in sterility. With her, on the other hand, every effort brings its due fruit, while heroic acts effect the miraculous." And that's something we found to be true again and again. So when we first started working in London, we faced the problem that anyone who wants to reach abortion-minded women faces. You can't just sit and wait for these women to approach you. The nature of women who are looking for an abortion is that they have been struggling probably with their conscience from the time they found out about the pregnancy. Other people around them often make the decision for them. You know, a study was mentioned earlier showing that 68% of people, women having abortions, have had their decisions made for them by other people. We see the same thing in our centre all the time. Often the boyfriend, the girl's mother, they're the two main culprits, but certainly the other people around the woman will also be a pressure in her making her decision. And so these women have been trained from the moment they've declared their pregnancy to people around them to feel that to talk about keeping the baby is a negative thing, it's going to ruin their own life, maybe it's going to ruin the baby's life. And so even on the level of caring for her child, the woman is trained from the start to see that the best thing for your child is abortion. The number of women who say to us, you know, I'm just being selfish keeping this baby, I'm going to ruin this baby's life, or maybe I won't love the baby because right now I don't know how I feel about this pregnancy. So they're trained from the start to feel that they're doing a good thing for the baby by having the abortion, and that keeping the baby would be a foolish, selfish thing. It's the wrong time, it's the wrong person, it's the wrong place, it's the wrong time in your career. All these reasons why having the baby is damaging to her and damaging to the child. So many of these women, the last thing they want to do is to speak to someone pro-life. For a start, the media tells them that the pro-life movement is only interested in the baby and not in them. And they're already in this huge struggle about what's the best for them, what's the best for the baby. And often, you know, from one day to the next, they're fighting with themselves to whether they should do the best thing for themselves or the best thing for the baby, or if that's the same thing or if it's different things. So there's all these things going on in the woman's own mind. She's often very divided about her decision already. Many of these women flee from any advice about the pregnancy as fast as they can. We actually have women telling us, I didn't want the counselling at the abortion centre because I knew they were going to try and talk me out of it. We think, how wrong you are. But often the woman is afraid to talk to anybody about her decision because she feels that any information they give her may just tip her back to keeping the baby. And she can't do that because that would be selfish, silly, foolish, undermine her life, hurt her baby. These are all the things that women are told. And they're told this constantly. If you watch soap operas, if you watch many of the programmes on TV, in the cinema, you'll see those same themes being repeated. It's silly, selfish, foolish, thoughtless, you're not thinking about your baby. Repeated over and over again to women. In fact, you know, sometimes women come in and you feel like, wow, they've just, you know, learnt the script off by heart. I mean, it's the same things you're hearing all the time. Because people are being programmed into seeing an unplanned pregnancy in this manner. We may not have a one-child policy here, but we've certainly had such a level of brainwashing in this country that, you know, women are, unless they are out there choosing to have a baby and planning it years in advance, many young women feel that just proceeding with an unplanned pregnancy is just a stupid thing to do. So the women themselves are pre-programmed not to look for our help. So as a crisis pregnancy centre, how do you overcome that? Well, the first thing I think okay, good advertising, being on the internet, all these things are important. But again, in the UK, what are we up against? If I want an abortion, I can get through to a booking line now. I don't have to wait till Monday. You know, I can't get a dental appointment. I can't see my doctor for 2 weeks, but I can get an abortion appointment booked this afternoon. One of our counsellors came in one day and she'd had a little booklet from the NHS put through her door with the BPAS booking line on it, because everyone needs one of those handy, right? So you can get an abortion so fast that it would make your head spin. So how do you reach those women? You know, many of those women are never going to come looking for a crisis pregnancy centre. They already don't want to hear what help there is available. They don't want to hear about the development of their baby. And on top of that, they can call their doctor or they can call the NHS booking line and have an abortion like that. So how do we reach them? Well, I mean, initially, being out there, being on the internet is good because they are sometimes going to look there for the quickest NHS booking line, and if you're lucky, your advert might reach them first. So there's a lot to be said for good marketing. But the majority of the girls that we see are not ever going to come to us that way, because those girls, you know, I'm sure most English-born and bred people who've grown up here are not going to go looking. You know, we don't look for private healthcare here, do we? Because everything's on the NHS and it's free. So you can get your free abortion. Why are you going to even look in a private place? So in about the early 200s, we started looking at other ways of reaching these women, and it became more and more apparent that the main way to reach them is to go where they're going. Okay, we'd all like to reach them much further up the line, but in fact, for us, the main way to reach them is to be at the sites where the abortions are happening and to be offering them help. So that's what we've been doing for the last few years. Now, one interesting thing that we have noticed is until about 2006, the abortion statistics for England and Wales had risen every year since abortion was introduced. But in about 2006, the abortion figures in London started to drop and have continued to drop pretty much up to the present. We don't know why they're dropping. They're dropping enough that it's actually making a difference to the national statistics. If I just give you some actual figures. Sorry. I'll try and speak up. So the population of London in 2001 was just over 7 million. The population of London by 2011 was just over 8 million. But in that time, abortions in London dropped from about 51,000 a year down to about 44,000 and continue to drop. And we hope they continue to drop. But this isn't really something that's happening anywhere else in the country. The population has increased. There's been a huge influx of immigrant populations, which are always first in line for abortions. You know, whatever your view of immigrants coming into the country are, I think one thing as pro-lifers we have to remember is these people are first in the queue for abortion. If they don't have legal status when they arrive here, everybody will advise them. We've had issues with the Red Cross sending girls to us to ask us to help them get abortions, girls being told they won't get legal rights to stay here if they don't have an abortion. So these, you know, immigrant populations coming in are very vulnerable to abortion. And yet, although there's been a huge influx of immigrants into London, the abortion figures continue to drop. On a, you know, realistic basis, there's nothing that we can say has actually impacted these figures. Somebody said to me earlier, you know, maybe it's better contraception. But, you know, actually, factually, we can say that wherever contraception use increases, abortion rates rise. Something that Mary Stopes say, BPAS say, and we've found ourselves. Over half of the girls that we see are regularly using contraceptives, but they fail eventually. So the only thing we know of is that during that time, there are several daily vigils that have sprung up in London. We have 3 vigils outside the abortion clinics every day. There's a lot of prayer and fasting that go on there. There have been several 40 Days for Life campaigns. There's the daily prayer in our own centre. We have adoration and mass every day for the end of abortion. We don't really know what the reasons are, but we know that, you know, we see hundreds of turnarounds. In an average year, we might see 100 women who change their mind outside the clinic. And yet we know that that's just the tip of the iceberg, because we regularly get calls from people who say, you know, 10 years ago I got this scrappy little blue leaflet that you give out outside the clinic. I never spoke to anybody, but that gave me the confidence to have my baby, because I knew that if I was in trouble, I could come to you. Or in some cases, it's just the simple witness. You know, the fact that those people cared about my baby more even than I was caring about my baby at the time, made me go home and think about my decision. Sometimes women will keep that leaflet in their bag, and you get women coming in who've had several abortions sometimes, but got this leaflet several years ago, and they pull out this screwed up little thing from the bottom of their bag, and they'll say, I just thought I'd keep hold of this in case I ever needed it. And you even find one leaflet can save 2 and 3 lives, because people pass it on, and other girls will come to you and say, oh, well, my friend gave me this leaflet. She kept her baby, but she didn't need your help. So being at the vigils themselves, being at the clinics and offering women help is a way to meet the women where they are. It's a way to meet abortion-bound women and give them alternatives. Now, outside the centres where the abortions happen, you've got very short space of time. The woman might walk past you and not take any notice, although the prayer is still being offered for her. But for the women who do choose to just think about the help that you're offering them. And I would say in some ways, the good thing about that last-minute approach is that women can be very desperate at that moment, and they can be very much more open, because, even though they're forcing themselves to do this, a lot of them are praying right up to the last minute, God, send me a sign, God, send me a sign. If you ask women why they've come in from the abortion centres, the most common response is, I asked God for a sign, and when I got to the abortion centre, somebody was there. So, I'd say 9 out of 10 women coming in from the vigils say that. So being at the vigils themselves and being there to offer that help, however well it's done or however badly, the leaflets we have, I'm sure you've seen them, they're not fantastic, they're not expensive, they're very plain. They just list the help that's available to the woman. Financial help, practical help, moral support. This is Monsignor Riley's Helpers of God's Precious Infant leaflet, which is used all over the world. It's very basic, We've gone for the colour version, the glossy version, everything. It doesn't make any difference. But just this basic, simple leaflet has saved hundreds and hundreds of lives. And they turn up everywhere. It's amazing sometimes where women get our leaflets. Number of doctors' surgeries and hospitals people find them in, where I presume some pro-lifers just left them. And it does show some information about the developing baby in the womb. We actually had a girl who'd had 3 abortions, and just seeing that line drawing was enough to make her burst into tears and say, I would never have done it if I had seen that my child was that developed, and she came in and kept her baby. So there are, very simple ways of reaching out to women that do actually cause them to turn around. So being at the places where abortions happen is crucial. In London, we've gone from having 7 abortion centres about 6 or 7 years ago to having 24. That was in September. I'm sure there's probably more now, because doctors' surgeries are now offering the abortion pill. It's becoming, there'll be an abortion centre on every corner the way we're going. So the reality of being at every centre is becoming more and more difficult. But I think, there's many of us here who can go to a local place and bear witness. You don't have to be there 40 hours a week. It's nice if you can. But any outreach that you make will be fruitful, even if you don't see the results of it. I think when the women actually come in to see us, there are certain things we want to do. This is about effective ways to end abortion. So, if you are in touch with somebody who's considering abortion, these are the things that we've found actually make a difference. First of all, prayer. Whatever your religious tradition is, pray for the woman. And don't let anybody, tell you to not pray. If the woman is open, pray with her. Obviously, we don't try and force anyone to accept our faith or pray with us if they don't want to. But there's many women. We see loads of Catholic girls and Pentecostal girls. We love Pentecostal girls because, Pentecostal ladies, often when you say, well, the Bible says this, they'll say, I know, I can't do it. It's just, there's a great openness there, I think, for some religious traditions who really have a strong faith in their Bible and really believe in the Word of God. So pray with the woman. She does need to be given accurate information about the development of her baby. Again, people say, oh, well, that might upset her. Well, yes, if it's going to upset her, it will certainly upset her a lot more when she sees it sometime after she's had her abortion. So sometimes the truth can be upsetting, and we try not to shove things in the woman's face. You have to approach things very gently. But she has the right to know how developed her baby is, what her baby looks like. The fact that her baby has a heartbeat from 3 weeks, those kind of things, she has the right to know. We do try and tell her what the abortion procedure that she's up for is going to involve. Whether it's the abortion pill or whether it's surgery, you should know what the abortion procedures involve. Everybody can find this out in 5 minutes on the internet. Read Mary Stopes' site on BPASs. I mean, I rarely recommend that, but on these particular issues, they use a lot of euphemistic terms, but they tell you basically what's happening. And then read some good pro-life sites like the ones that were mentioned earlier and compare the way the methods are described. But know what the abortion clinics are doing. Know what the abortion clinic near you is offering. Ring them up and ask them. We do that all the time. And it's interesting to know what they're offering and how they're presenting it to people who speak to them. You know, it's ridiculous that pro-lifers don't know where their local abortion clinic is or what's happening there. Yes, this is a huge abuse of human nature, and we need to know the insides of it. If we want to fight something, you've got to know your enemy. So know what the methods involve and be able to tell somebody simply. You don't have to use the most gory, horrific language. It's gory and horrific anyway, however you explain it. So be prepared to tell people this. We do use some graphic images. We don't just show them to the woman as a matter of course, but we have them. And when we're talking to the woman, if necessary, we will show her. We'll show her in order to show her not something gory and horrible, but to show her that, you know, at this point the baby is alive. After the abortion, the baby is dead. That may seem obvious to us, but I can tell you that when you're, you know, struggling with something so deep, women block out a lot of details, and people around them are saying, well, it's not really a baby, it's a blob of tissue, you know, and we have to give them the truth on that. So we do have graphic pictures that we use. With men, particularly when the men are pressurizing the woman to have an abortion, we do everything in our power to offer them the option to see an actual abortion video. And this has been extremely fruitful. You know, I think graphic pictures are a double-edged sword, and I think sometimes outside a clinic with graphic pictures you can alienate people so that they will run into the clinic all the quicker because they're afraid of them. But I think there is a place for them, you know, in their place, shown in a loving manner for part of service of the truth. There is a place for them, and I've seen many, many men who are dead set on pushing a woman into having an abortion change their mind because somebody has shown them the reality of an abortion. If the man has no investment in the woman, he's often not going to respond greatly to nice pictures of the baby in the womb, unless he comes from quite a family background or a, you know, a place where life is very respected. He often will not really respond very much to those pictures. But seeing the baby's death, I think men are created to protect, aren't they? And seeing a child that's been torn to pieces can actually awaken something in a man, even who has no investment in this woman, to recognise his child and what's taking place with his child. We see 3 types of men really in our centre. We always encourage the women to bring the men. Men don't always want to come. Men don't really like talking much, so they don't, you know, the women go home and say, oh, come in for counselling. We always say, don't say that, because they won't come, and they don't want to come. But in some cases, the man will come, and often the man will come to make sure the job is getting done. He wants to see that abortion has happened. Now, not all men are bad, of course, as we know, but in our business, we do see the worst, I've got to be honest. I would say that about 5% of the men we see are dead set on the woman keeping the baby, and they are doing everything they can to try and persuade her. And sometimes we're like, why have you brought her to an abortion clinic if you're so against this? You know, you don't just have to go along with her and help her to get there. If you stood up to her, maybe she wouldn't get there. But those men, you know, you work with them in every way you can to try and help them to offer the girl what she needs and coach them to be the sort of man they need to be to support the woman and help her through her pregnancy. Another 20% of the men are dead set on the abortion, and they will do anything to push this woman into the abortion. The woman really needs to be protected from those men, and they need to have their eyes open to what the man is doing. And often, you know, women can be so defensive of the man and, you know, putting up with so much rubbish, really, it'd make you scream. But you do everything you can to get him to man up, get him to recognise what's happening here, and to get her into a safe place where she's not under his pressure. But for the great majority in the middle, about, you know, another 75% of the men, they are just saying to the woman, well, you know, it's completely your decision. I'll support you, whatever you want to do. Now, these men are actually in some ways worse than the other 2 groups because, you know, the man who's totally in favour of her keeping the baby, that's just what you want. The other group, they're really outrageously pushing for the abortion, and sometimes the woman will actually look and think, well, you know, what a heel. But these ones in the middle, they're being the feminist man, you know, I'll support you, whatever you want to do. Well, if you've got a 2-year-old child, and you want to throw him under a bus and your husband said to you, I'll support you, whatever you want to do, it's very clear what he wants you to do. So I think the man has to stand up and say, actually, this is my child. I don't want you to end the child's life. I want something better for you. I want something better for our child. And if he doesn't, not only is he not really supporting her in any way, he's also putting all the guilt on her. I didn't make you have the abortion. I said I'd support you whatever you would do. But the women know full well that he's not making any commitment to support her to keep the baby. So these are the men that we struggle with all the time, really. That's the great majority of men, and trying to get them into having some backbone and actually standing up for their child is a struggle. Sometimes they do. We have male counsellors in our centres as well, which I know, not many centres do have, but we've found it such a blessing. And when a boyfriend comes in, you often say to the girl, would you like me to get one of the male counsellors to talk to him? Like, yes. It's also a great witness to the girls when they see men outside the clinics and when they see men in the centre. This man is more concerned about me and my baby than that heel. What am I doing with him? Why isn't my boyfriend behaving like this? So it is a great witness. It's a very powerful witness to the women. So we tell them about the development of their baby. We tell them what the abortion will do to the baby. We talk about the risks of abortion. Of course, in England, there are no risks of abortion because we have this free NHS and they see everybody and they look after everybody and no one has any complications of abortion. I think there's about a 2% risk of miscarriage or infertility, and that's about the only thing that they acknowledge. There's no mental health risks. There are no risks. But except there's a few problems with that. First of all, the NHS require that the feedback forms from the abortion clinics be submitted within a week of the abortion, which means that they're done immediately after the abortion and sent back to the DHS, the NHS, you know who I mean, the Department of Health. They're sent back the same week. So they're basically done immediately after. And in fact, if you look at the national statistics, it says this doesn't take into any consideration, any injuries that occur after the woman has left the abortion clinic. So as far as I can see, those statistics are worth nothing. We actually had a midwife arguing online, pro-life midwife, arguing with some pro-choice, if you call that choice, people. And they said, well, this is normal. When you have a baby, they don't follow you up forever. And she said, well, actually, there is a sort of follow-up for 6 months after you have a baby. But there's no follow-up at all after you have an abortion. Basically, if you go outside the door of the abortion centre and died on the road, you don't need to be included in the abortion statistics. So by that reckoning, I don't really place any store on the statistics for the risks to women following an abortion. In fact, Mary Stopes challenged our leaflet because they didn't like the risks that we say are possible even following an abortion. We also talk to them about their religious belief. If they have no religious belief, we're not going to hammer on about the Bible for the next hour. But if the woman has any religious belief at all, we ask her to pray about her decision. We ask her what her religion's teaching is about abortion. And we ask her to think about that and spend some time in prayer. If she's Catholic, maybe go to confession. If whatever tradition she is, maybe go and speak to her pastor. You have to be careful because there are some churches that are very pro-abortion, sadly, but we do ask her to pray about her decision, and that's usually quite fruitful if she is honestly going to pray. I mean, a lot of women say, I've been praying that God will forgive me. It's like, well, let's pray that you can avoid this decision so that God doesn't have to forgive you. It's very important to get them to start thinking about the fact that God created them to be the mother of this child. He created the child, and he could have given that child to some woman who was never going to consider abortion. But from the beginning of time, he knew that this child's life was going to be risked, and yet he still made the choice to give this child to that woman because he so wanted her to be the mother of that child and to accept that mission. It's part of her salvation to work out her salvation through the mission God gives her. And obviously that's something women who've had an abortion struggle with. And you can see that women who repent of their abortions often come to terms with that much better because they actually still try to fulfill in the way that they can their spiritual motherhood of their child. Real help is important. We don't see huge amounts of people in great financial difficulty here. The benefit system, poor as it is in many regards, and I'm not saying it's a good thing in many regards because I can see a lot of negative effects it has on the women that we see, but it does mean you've basically got a roof over your head and food on your table. So for most British women coming into us, finances aren't a huge problem. There are exceptions, women who've got huge debts or who haven't been able to pay the rent for the last 6 months and now can't be housed anywhere, these kind of things. But for the most part, practical help isn't something, financial help at least, isn't something we're giving in huge amounts to British women. I mean, it's there if they need it, but it's not the biggest issue. For immigrant populations, however, and this is something, again, I feel is very poorly known in the pro-life community, many of the women we see have got no rights to housing, no rights to benefits, no rights to anything for their children. Many of the charities, virtually all the charities that exist in this country will not house them because they don't have rights to public funds. So we end up, we're a pregnancy counselling organisation really, but we end up housing women, feeding women, clothing women, getting baby goods for their children, because there are very few places that we can send them. And people write to us and say, oh, send them to this shelter or send them to this group. And this group and that group just don't have housing available to people who don't have public funds. I feel like, certainly in the Catholic community, I feel that's not really known at all. And it's a huge undertaking for us, on top of our work, to try and fund and support those women, as well as just trying to reach them and counsel them. There's so many things that we're missing, really. I mean, I think it's very important in your local area to find out what help there is. We talked about finding out what your abortion centre's doing, so find out what your pro-life centre's doing. Have you got a good pro-life counselling centre in your area? When I say good, is it actually reaching anyone who is set on abortion? Why not? Is it prepared to tell you how many girls they're seeing? It won't be huge numbers, because I can tell you we're one of the busiest centres in the country and we're not seeing huge numbers of women. The more people we have outside the vigils, the more people we will see in our centres. And at times, we're seeing 2 or 3 turnarounds a day. It just depends on the people you've got out there, the commitment they've got, their abilities out there, those kind of things. But, many pregnancy centres, we would probably see between 3 and 8 or 9 women a week. And that's extremely busy for a pregnancy centre these days. Go back 20 years, and if you were doing pregnancy testing, for example, free pregnancy testing, you'd have a stream of women in your door. But who needs a free pregnancy test now? I can buy one in the pound shop. I can buy a box of them in the pound shop. Nobody needs that service to the same extent. So you're just not seeing women in those numbers unless you're reaching out to them. So see what help is out there. See if your centres are reaching these women. See if they're providing real help to women who don't have housing and food. See if they will, at the end of a session, either give a referral letter or even help the woman to book an abortion. I personally would say, if your pro-life pregnancy centre is doing that, don't touch them with a barge pole, and there are many. So it's important to find out what they're doing. And if they don't want to tell you what they're doing, I would be a bit wary about that too. But if everyone in this room went away and founded a crisis pregnancy centre, there's plenty work for all of you. There's no place in this country where there's enough centres doing this work, full stop.
Is there any movement on how to start a pregnancy centre?
Well, I can talk about that in the question section. So people who fall between the cracks, there is nothing there for them. What should a centre be like? It should be prayerful. It should be reaching these women. It should be offering real help. And it should be something that, is getting the local community involved and making you aware what help there is out there, what's going on in the local community. Get involved in your local centres. And if there isn't one, think about setting one up. If there are local centres, look at how you can volunteer. There is no pro-life movement without real help for women, and real help for women in these situations is very scattered and poor in this country. So that would be my message, really. What is your local pregnancy centre doing? And if you don't know, what have you got to offer a woman who's in trouble? So that's mainly what I wanted to say. If anyone would like to know more, I'll be around at the back and be glad to talk to anyone who's interested in the work.